and pass the Reid Plan so we can avert disaster. We owe it to our constituents, and we owe it to our children. Madam President, I yield the floor. I would note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
I ask that further proceedings on the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I rise today to discuss the FAA bill. On Friday, authorization for the Federal Aviation Administration was allowed to expire. 4,000 workers placed on furlough. And the Airport and Airways Trust Fund now lacks the authority to collect user fees that fund air traffic services, airport maintenance, and other things that Americans rely on. Let's be clear. This should not have happened. It happened because a few members of the other body made a conscious choice to negotiate in bad faith. Clear and simple. Let me recap. Under the able leadership of Senator Rockefeller, the Senate again passed our long-term FAA authorization in February with a bipartisan vote of 87-8. Later, the House passed the bill, but largely along party lines. In April, the Senate named conferees to negotiate a final bill. However, our friends in the House have yet to appoint conferees to join us at the negotiating table. Meanwhile, since 2007, we have passed 20 extensions to allow this program to continue operating while we work to negotiate a long-term solution. Not a single one of those extensions has been met with controversy. Not one. However, as we undertook what should have been the latest clear extension, the House unexpectedly eliminated 13 rural airports that rely on essential air service just days before the authorization expired. The House refused to reconsider and chose instead to shut down the Federal Aviation Administration. The House seeks to save approximately 0.1% of overall aviation spending by attacking essential air service. I agree with anyone who wants to control federal spending and invest in real priorities. We all do. But it simply doesn't make sense to focus on saving fractions of pennies on the dollar instead of coming to the negotiating table to hammer out long-term solutions. At the same time, the House rejected an opportunity to protect our troops from exorbitant baggage fees. Congressman Nick Rahall introduced an amendment to the House extension that would have prohibited air carriers from charging a baggage fee for members of the armed services while traveling on official military duty, and especially those checking 4 or fewer bags. In one instance, the airline reportedly socked a poor service member with a baggage fee of $3,000. Regrettably, the House rejected this offer to protect our troops. Rejection is on a party line vote. Those of us negotiating in good faith here in the Senate were left scratching our heads. The House would reject a clean extension to save a mere 0.1% by attacking rural jobs and commerce. But it would reject an opportunity to protect our troops from getting gouged by baggage fees on the same bill. It doesn't make sense. Later, we learned through the press that the House's erratic strategy had apparently nothing to do with potential cost savings at all. But instead, these antics were about rulemaking by the National Mediation Board. This is a labor issue that has nothing to do with essential air service and nothing to do with the daily operations of the Federal Aviation Administration, both of which would be operating right now under a clean extension. This labor issue should be worked out in the conference. The conference committee we can't have because the House has yet to name conferees. One of the rural communities the House members chose to cut down as a political pawn is Glendive, Montana. Glendive is growing in the energy sector. It's in the Bakken Formation. Lots of oil and gas wells drilled, and it's a huge potential new energy source. Energy companies from Texas and Louisiana are rapidly sending personnel up to Glendive, and hotels in the area run at near full occupancy year-round. We're working hard to quickly build housing and infrastructure in order to capitalize on this great opportunity to create much-needed jobs. And today, unemployment in Glendive is half the national average. But Glendive is located 230 miles from any larger airport. Glendive needs essential air service to maintain its lifeline to national commerce, and continue to grow, create jobs. Mr. President, we can discuss at length the merits of essential air service, the promise made to rural America, and the lifeline it provides to towns like Glendive. In fact, this is a conversation we should have. Any changes should be made as part of a thoughtful and transparent discussion with input from the folks on the ground who will be most affected. Again, that is precisely what conference negotiations are for. Yet again, negotiations we can't hold. Why? Because the House is yet to name its conferees. The House antics have halted as much as $2.5 billion in airport funding, funding that employs as many as 87,000 workers on construction projects around the country. At Glacier International Airport in Kalispell, Montana, Montana's much-needed upgrade to a taxiway are now on hold indefinitely. And so are the much-needed construction jobs this project would support. Even more troubling, 4,000 mothers and fathers and breadwinners are now out of work. These are folks like Christina Richardson, an administrative support specialist at Billings Logan International Airport's air traffic control tower. Over the weekend, Christina wasn't able to go grocery shopping. She didn't know if she could count on her next paycheck to buy food and pay her bills. Christina described the pit in her stomach when she went in to clean off her desk and shut down her computer. Christina told my office she worried who would help the people she had been working with. She described the pride and fulfillment that comes from working and the blow that comes when that is taken away. Luckily, Christina was told on Tuesday that she'd be able to return to work. But 4,000 other folks across the country haven't been so lucky. Like most Montanans, Christina is one tough lady, and she understands the vital importance of essential air service to rural communities. Even when she thought she'd been furloughed, she stuck in there. Christina contacted my office to voice her support for a clean FAA extension that rejects arbitrary cuts to rural communities. I'm increasingly concerned about the nature of our political discourse. Lately, it seems some folks are more focused on making 30-second sound bites than making laws. What happened with the FAA bill is an example of this misguided focus. Whatever the House's true reason was for suspending 4,000-plus jobs and halting construction to improve airport safety, it just wasn't right. Still, I know we can do good things around here when we work together. And I hold out the hope that we will return our focus back to what's important and start getting things done. It's not just here, it's on debt extension, it's a lot of big, major matters around here. But in the meantime, we need to fix this mess. This is easier to fix, much easier. Along with Senator Rockefeller, I introduced a clean FAA extension that would put 4,000 employees back to work, let us start construction projects around the country to create jobs and improve safety of our airports, and continue to fund the trust fund. Then, together, we can continue working on a longer-term solution. I urge my colleagues to support a clean extension. Mr. President, I give the floor to Justice Alvin Quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. consent that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, we have three separate issues facing the Congress today. First, the authority of the Treasury Department to borrow to meet the nation's obligations will be reached on Tuesday. In order for borrowing to continue after Tuesday, Congress needs to raise the debt ceiling. That's the first of the three issues. The second issue that we face is the need to help our economy to become prosperous again. Unfortunately, the debate here in Congress has totally lost sight of this issue, the issue of how we can grow the economy, how we can create jobs. And the third of the three issues is the need to put in place a long-term plan to reduce the deficit and the debt. The issue of raising the debt ceiling and reducing the long-term deficit and debt have unfortunately come to be seen by many here in Congress as a single issue. So I want to urge all colleagues to take a step back and to recognize, first, that these issues are separate, and second, that failure to responsibly deal with the first of these issues, that is, failure to raise the debt limit, will greatly hamper our ability to deal with the other two issues that I've mentioned. The failure to raise the debt limit will not return our economy to prosperity. Instead, it will postpone the day when that prosperity returns. The failure to raise the debt limit will not help reduce our debt and deficit. It will add to the debt and deficit by raising interest rates for the government and for all Americans. So let's review how we got here. Since the beginning of this Congress, nearly 7 months ago, the Republican majority in the House has had a laser focus on one issue, and that is cutting spending. And to achieve that objective, the first strategy adopted by the Republican leadership in the House was to threaten a shutdown of the government unless sufficient spending cuts were agreed to. Spending cuts were agreed to, and at the final hour, Republicans agreed to pass the bill that was needed to fund the government for the balance of the fiscal year. And by that I mean through the 31st of September of this year. So as soon as that crisis was averted and the threat to close down the government was behind us, at least for a few months, the effort shifted to a new strategy. And this strategy was to threaten a first-in-history default by the government on its financial obligations if enough additional spending cuts were not agreed to. That is, spending cuts in addition to what were agreed to in order to avert a shutdown of the government. The device for bringing about that default was refusal to extend the debt ceiling when the government's borrowing authority was scheduled to be reached, and that is the 2nd of August, next Tuesday. We should remind ourselves of what an artificial device this is that is being used for leverage in this negotiation. Congress passes the laws that determine how much revenue the federal government collects. And Congress passes the laws that determine how much we obligate the government to spend. And when the revenue that we collect is less than the amount we are committed to spend, the Secretary of the Treasury has no alternative but to borrow money to meet the obligations that Congress has taken on. So in a period like today, when the government is receiving in revenues much less than is required to meet its obligations, there are two logical actions for Congress to take. First, it can raise more revenue. Second, it can reduce the obligations of the government. But in refusing to allow the Secretary of the Treasury to borrow, we are taking neither of these logical steps. Instead, we are telling the Secretary of the Treasury to default on the obligations which this and previous Congresses have already taken on behalf of the American people. We're told by the Secretary of the Treasury that unless Congress acts, he will be forced to default or renege on our obligations beginning next week, August 2nd. The refusal to raise the debt ceiling and the threatening of default on our obligations has achieved much of what Republicans set out to achieve in this Congress. It has precipitated a crisis. In order to avoid that crisis, Democrats have agreed to or acceded to the primary demands that the Republican majority in the House have made. And what are those demands? Well, there are two primary demands. One is, the first of those demands was that all of the deficit reduction be accomplished with cuts in spending. No revenue increases could be raised, no revenue could be raised from the wealthiest in our society to help close this gap between revenues and spending. No loopholes could be closed, no subsidies could be eliminated in the tax code. Democrats have agreed that the deficit reduction would not be accomplished with a balanced package of spending cuts and revenue increases, as the previous deficit reduction packages have been under President Reagan, under President George H.W. Bush, and, of course, under President Clinton. This deficit reduction that we are now considering would be done with spending cuts only. So that was the first demand, and it was one that Democrats have acceded to. The second demand of the Republican leadership was the totally arbitrary demand that the size of the increase in the debt ceiling not exceed the amount of spending cuts projected in the federal budget over the next 10 years. This is a demand totally lacking in any logical justification, but again, Democrats have agreed in order to achieve a solution to the immediate impasse. In order to avoid the threatened default on our obligations, Senator Reid has put forward a proposal that would lock in, according to the Congressional Budget Office, about $2.2 trillion of deficit reduction over 10 years, with cuts in both discretionary spending and mandatory spending. The Treasury Secretary would be given authority to borrow to meet the obligations that Congress has undertaken for approximately another 18 months. The proposal also puts in place a bipartisan and a bicameral committee with responsibility to present Congress with legislation to further reduce the deficit. Unfortunately, it appears that this proposal that Senator Reid has made will be opposed by many on the Republican side. Some say the cuts are not sufficiently deep and that they would rather push the country into default than agree to a mere $2.2 trillion in spending cuts. Some others say that they want to extend the debt ceiling for a shorter period so that we can have another showdown with another threatened government default 6 or 7 months from now. And some say that causing the federal government to default will not have the adverse consequences the Secretary of the Treasury has predicted, and that in fact it will have a salutary effect on both our economy and our politics. I strongly disagree with all of these views. I believe that a refusal to honor our obligations will have a major adverse consequence for our economy. I believe that Congress should act now to raise the debt limit in order to avoid these adverse consequences. And although the proposal that Senator Reid has brought forward fails the test of balance between spending cuts and revenue increases, which I would prefer, it is a plan I'm willing to support in order to head off a default on our nation's obligations. I understand that additional deficit reduction will be required in the months and years ahead. But clearly, the responsible course is to do what can be done today, and that is adopt the Reid plan. Only by doing so can we once again focus on the steps that we can take to return our economy to prosperity. That is the first priority for most Americans today. It should be our first priority as well. Mr. President, I yield the floor. I suggest the absence of quorum.
And the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.